And we're having a very special lunch with a man named Stephen Johnsongrove. And first I have to apologize for spelling his name wrong. I hate it when I make mistakes like this, where I spell things the way they sound, and you shouldn't, because a V should be a PH. So when he puts his name button on and it says Stephen with a V, know that it comes with my apologies. And also on a paper that I'm reluctant to hand out, but I can hand it out later, it also spells his name with a V, and I'll have to change it back.
One more mistake and we're going to fire you.
Go ahead. You can decrease my pay by 10%.
You'd have to start giving them something.
Yeah, I'd have to start giving out candy or something. I don't know what I'd do. Like General Motors. Yeah, I'll have to move you to another place or something. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Greater Cincinnati Democrats. We're glad to have you here. We have a special program for you today on Ohio Justice and the Policy Center. So we're happy about that. Somebody wants to have you not talk while I'm talking. Okay, so with our welcome today, we have all kinds of announcements. And I do have that for next week. We have the Ohio Coalition for Equity and Adequacy in School Funding. And that is going to be very popular, so we better get here early. Bill Phillips is going to be here. And he's going to be talking about... That's next week. Sorry about that. That's next week. Bill Phillips. Can you hear me, Bill Phillips? Okay, Bill Phillips is next week. Okay. Other announcements. David, he's got his hand up. Bring your microphone over there. There you go. We have a special volunteer. This is David. He's our youngest Democrat so far.
Thank you, David.
And David is the grandson of Katie, who is our co-founder here. Go for it, Jim.
Okay, once again, I want to let you folks know that I am still accepting signatures on the Better Bus Coalition petition. This is the one that adds 2/10 to the Cincinnati earnings tax. If you live in the city of Cincinnati and are a registered voter or need to re-register because you have moved, I've got forms for that too. That petition is still available to be signed if you have not had a chance to do that previously. Thank you very much.
So sign. There's one thing to sign. And now we got Marlena. Gotta be quicker, David.
Happy Tuesday again. Marlena Brookfield, running for Cincinnati Public School Board. A couple quick announcements. One is that this Friday, the 19th, in honor of my birthday on Saturday, I'm having a karaoke meet and greet at Poppy's Sports Bar and Grill. It'll be from 8:30 to 11. Donations not required, but if you are feeling generous, we'll accept them. Really just come out, have a good time, sing a few songs, and ask me whatever questions. Last night at the CPS board meeting, they passed a resolution to adopt the later start times for high schools. And coming off of the announcement for the bus tax, we don't have any of our transportation issues worked out yet. And that's really concerning because that means we are potentially looking at a very high price tag to get more Metro buses so that this thing can be accomplished. I'm worried that they're not being good stewards of our tax dollars with this and trying to push something so that, I'll just be honest, there are a few board members that are trying to use this as a stepping stone, and I'm worried that they're going to spend money we don't have for something that we can't do right now. So please, please, please pay attention to these board meetings and get in there. Tell them how you feel, because they're not in the habit of listening to us very well. Thank you.
Let's keep the price of education down. Not out, but down.
Would you repeat? I missed what they're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So they've been working on trying to get later start times for the high schools for a long time, and there's a community group that's been pushing for it. The research is there to support that later start times are good for the kids in high school. I support that, but what I have an issue with is that it's going to take a lot of money because we're beholden to Metro for high school transportation. Metro doesn't have the money for new buses. We certainly don't have the money for new buses. And if they're going to start this next year, where's that money coming from?
Everybody see the financial problem here, folks? You gotta make sure they're not spending money they don't have. David is looking for the next person with an announcement. Raise your hand. There you go.
Hello,
Donna.
everybody. I just wanted to let you know that I am still trying to get a hold of Steve Shabbat's office.
Real close.
Trying to find out when the next meetings are going to be. As of yet, I'm still being told that there is nothing that has been announced, nothing has been firmed up. And so if we could all start making phone calls, don't rely on me because I could easily be shut down. And so we all need to get out there, and I guess we could probably post it out there on the Greater Cincinnati Dems website so we all know what it is.
Okay, other announcements? Deborah, you look like you have something going on. Oh, we have Sid has arrived. Sid has arrived, our youngest Democrat. Just wave your hand, Sid. Sid, wave your hand. There you go, he's back there. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Bennett.
I just want to make a brief comment about Elizabeth Warren, who's running for president. I'd like to support her. Let me tell you some of the things she's doing. What she's doing is some specific programs rather than just lofty suggestions. She's suggesting taxing assets of our hyper millionaires. If you have $50 million, she wants 2% of that. I think it's a good idea. Between 50 million and $1 billion, 2%. Over $1 billion, 3%. I think that's a good idea. That's not an income tax. That's an asset tax. So that's yearly. Excellent idea. She's talking about a 7% surtax on profits over $100 million. Is that such a bad idea? Profit of $100 million, tax anything over that. That's Amazon made $10 billion in profits last year and got a $129 million refund. General Motors, $4.3 billion, got a $104 million refund. That's crazy. I mean, what she's doing is identifying where the problem is. The problem is concentration of wealth and the process to continue that concentration of wealth. She's suggesting that the U.S. produce generic drugs. I think that's a good idea too. So that in fact these drug companies can't just rape us. She's suggesting we back our antitrust laws that already exist and break up some of the big tech companies like Amazon and Google. She has a lot of what Peter would call class-based propositions, which I support. So I support her for president. She's also forcing the other candidates to come up with some programs rather than just lofty rhetoric. Thank you.
Let me just add, she has a very detailed rural farmer program which is getting no publicity at all, but how we could actually have farmers make more money instead of huge agribusiness people taking over the whole idea of agriculture.
We don't have the 40-year-olds to take over our farming industry.
People might want to know on the subject of Steve Shabbat and town halls. I live in inner city South Avondale. There was a large town hall organized in one of the senior places. It was packed and Steve Shabbat no-showed. He sent a couple of administrators from his local office. That's Steve Shabbat's respect for the inner city.
When was that?
That was a month ago.
Other announcements? Katie?
I would like to remind you all, tomorrow night at the Madisonville Rec Center from 6 until 7:30 is going to be the fair tax abatement meeting. It's going to basically saying what we know, what's going on, and make some recommendations. Because what we're finding out is that every day goes by, we're finding out some more under the table stuff that goes on. Just one we found out, you know, you hear about the Port Authority. Port Authority, by law, it's this tiny little paragraph in the Ohio Revised Code that basically says that the Port Authority will pay no taxes, not sales tax, not anything. So, Port Authority is going to be building the FC Stadium. So in other words, they were paying no sales tax, any materials there, anything. No income tax, nothing, they pay no sales tax. So this is what FC was going to do until the Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition caught them at it. They were going to do a series of 1-year leases with the Port Authority because they're tax exempt for 12 months. They were going to do a series of 10 1-year leases to get away from having to pay taxes. So you see the other thing, there's laws out there, and then there are people sitting in back rooms trying to figure out how they can manipulate the law. So every day, we're finding out more things. So tonight, from 6 until 8 at the Bond Hill Rec Center, Tamaya Denard is going to be there, and she's going to be talking about all the different kinds of abatements there are in the Cincinnati area. And that's an education one to find out everything that's out there. I can't even begin to tell you the number of abatements that are out there. So that's from 6 to 8 tonight at the Rec Center at Bond Hill. And then on tomorrow night, it's going to be Madisonville Rec Center, and this is sponsored by Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition and 22 nonprofits. So please come out and join us. Every time I go to one of these meetings, I think I know a lot about tax abatements, and I find out more.
Where is the rec center?
Rec Center is on Stewart Avenue. So in other words, off of Madison Road, you turn north on Stewart. Tonight? No, that's tomorrow night. That's
tonight, Bond Hill.
No, Bond Hill is on Elizabeth Street in Bond Hill at the Bond Hill Rec Center.
It's off Ready Road.
Yeah, on Elizabeth. Yeah.
All right, other announcements? Anybody? David's looking for the microphone. It's not. Okay, it's coming back to me. And with us today, we have our excellent speaker for today from the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. His name is Stephen, spelled with a P-H, please. He has a microphone that I'm going to adjust as we go along. So, without further ado, he's going to tell us more about himself today. Here is Stephen Johnsongrove.
Thank you for having me, and I am only actually one half of the duo here. We have our board chair, Eileen Cooper-Reed. This is pretty loud.
Can you hear that?
Yeah. Oh, it's not. It's okay. All right. It just sounds loud from behind me. Eileen Cooper-Reed is our board chair, and she is also available for questions, although she may turn you back to me. She probably will. So, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your interest in the criminal justice system and criminal justice policy, what that means politically, what that means for human beings at every level of this state, every part of this city. So the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, we've been around for over 20 years. A couple of years ago, we celebrated our 20th anniversary. I'm very proud of that. For a long time, and as many of you know, we were started by Al Gerhardstein to specifically serve the legal needs of incarcerated people. We were dealing with prison conditions, people being treated horribly in prison, getting abused by guards, being beat up by other inmates and not being protected, denial of religious rights, other things like that. So that's what we exist to do, and I'm so honored to see Dr. Rosing here, and I'm so sorry I forgot your name, sir. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes. And Dr. Rucknagel, yes, and Dick Rucknagel have all in various ways supported and volunteered with OJPC, sometimes very specific cases and medical advice. for our clients, incarcerated people. So that's where we started, and we still do that. That's still a huge portion of our work, is serving incarcerated people in the state. There are 50,000 people in state prison, and David Singleton, our executive director, he is a hero, a legend among legends. If you don't know him, he has been my boss, my partner in many ways for, well, ever since I've lived in Cincinnati, which is going on 14 years now. So David has been here at OJPC for about 16 years. He is an incredible litigator, an incredible leader, and it's important that you get to know him because, well, I'll say this to the end, but I'm not going to be here much longer, so I'll explain that more later. But David Singleton is incredible and a great person to keep learning from. And he still leads much of this litigation for incarcerated people. Another big thing we do is remove barriers for people after they're done with the criminal justice system. Might be that they were in prison, but there's a lot of people who get criminal records who never go to prison. Maybe they spend time in jail, maybe they're on probation, but that criminal record, the fact of that criminal record is a lifelong ball and chain. I mean, it is a lifelong burden on someone, housing, jobs, divorce, fishing licenses, ability to adopt children, all kinds of things you might not even think about. Almost any kind of thing that's regulated in this state that has an Ohio Administrative Code section attached to it, somewhere down in there is going to be like, oh, by the way, if you have a felony record, forget about it. Or maybe you can't have it until 20 years from now. It's like all of civil life is in some way shrouded by the fact of a criminal record if you have one. So we work on that through a couple things. We do policy reform at the state level, but we also do a lot of outreach legal clinics. I don't know if people know this, but for about 15 years, we have done outreach legal clinics. We've done a free-store food bank. For a long time, we did them at Our Daily Bread. Now we don't do them there, but we do them at Cincinnati State. We do spot clinics where we just kind of one-time pop-up clinics when people invite us, where there's a lot of folks that need this legal help. We help people with getting their records sealed. We get them certificates of qualification for employment, which is a long and complicated name and a long and complicated thing, but it actually is quite useful for removing barriers for people that have a criminal record and want to get into a job, get a license, especially if they're trying to get a license. Cosmetology, barbers, game wardens, underground tank installation inspectors. I mean, there's just you wouldn't be surprised by the number of licenses required in this day and age to get any kind of job, and if it's regulated by the state. A CQE, the Certificate of Qualification for Employment, removes barriers when someone's trying to get that job if they have a record. So we help people with that. And then the third thing we do is what I've been leading for the past few years is, it sounds like the first one is a little different, shrinking the prison population. So yes, we were very concerned, like regardless of whatever size the prison population is, we're going to protect the rights and the humanity of people inside prison. But the other thing we're trying to do at a big system level is shrink the whole thing. So, you can throw out, I'm not sure if I'll get a cheer or a Rotten Tomato, or maybe both, but I was one of the authors of issue 1. The Rotten Tomatoes are coming later. So it depends on what room I say that in. I got a duck. So, as you can tell, that was a big play. That was a big, bold move on our part to dramatically shrink the prison population safely through some significant, yet fairly simple, honestly, policy reforms. That's what our third big chunk of work is about, is shrinking the system. And we continue to do that, even though issue 1 did not pass. So that's my my segue to like what's next. And then this is what I want to offer to you all as you're just thinking about all the work that you do, the candidates that you talk to, the currently sitting politicians that you talk to, the boards and bodies and entities that you're in front of and that have political power to do things, is just to give you a quick overview of some of the big criminal justice policy things that are moving right now locally and state level. I'll briefly reference federal, but that's not my game. I just don't do federal much, but we can talk a little bit about that if somebody's really passionate. So the first thing is to pick up from issue 1. So issue 1 failed miserably, and I spent the last several months processing that with many brilliant people and heartfelt people, learning all the lessons we learned from that. And there's a lot we learned. But there's a lot we gained, even though the ballot box score was bad. We have dramatically, I think, shifted some of the conversation around drug policy and criminal justice policy. And if nothing else, we connected them together. Right after Election Day, all the newspapers that editorialized against us, from here to Akron to Cleveland and Toledo and everywhere in between, all the ones that issued editorials against issue 1 then said, well, they made a good point, and we really need to do something about that. They didn't like the constitutionality. They said issue 1 shouldn't have touched the Constitution, but the point that was being made, which is we're spending too much time and energy focused on incarcerating people with drug addiction and not enough time investing in treatment, and that we should shrink the one and grow the other. That seems to be into consciousness now. That seems to be that was talked about by all those papers. There seems to be legislators talking that way, and just like recognizing that those two things are linked together is we claim that as a win, and we're very proud of that. And I think that's an asset we can use going forward, is to keep that conversation connected. Right now, there's a bill pending, Senate Bill 3. It is talked about in many ways as the follow-up to issue 1, because it does a piece of it. It took, just like issue 1 was trying to do, take a big chunk, most drug possession felonies, the low-level drug possession felonies, and convert them to misdemeanors, so that people don't have those lifelong consequences I talked about earlier, right? Jobs, housing, etc. And so that people don't go to prison for an addiction, because state prison is a sledgehammer into someone's life. And addiction is a disease. Even our most ardent opponents, such as Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, readily acknowledges that addiction is a disease. And if addiction is a disease, putting somebody in a cage very far away from their families in some state prison for a year or more years does nothing to make them better. We can refer to our doctors in the room, and please confirm me if I'm wrong, but putting someone in a cage doesn't make them better of any disease, certainly not the disease of addiction. So Senate Bill 3 is proposing to do this reclassification. Take the lowest level drug possession felonies, F4s and F5s, turn them into misdemeanors. It takes out fentanyl, so fentanyl stays a felony, because you may remember the debate around that during the issue 1 campaign. And it also, certain class of drugs they call gate rate drugs, certain drugs they say enable sexual assault, those will remain felonies. Yes. But others that are just possession, not trafficking remains a felony as well, if you're selling. But if it's just possession to use and it's this low quantity, that could become a misdemeanor. That's what Senate Bill 3 is talking about doing. There is stiff opposition from the prosecutors and the judges and Chief Justice O'Connor. Very stiff opposition. Because they believe that threatening someone with a felony and with prison time is essential to make them better. Like, that is a medically necessary, I guess medically, if they start with the argument that a disease is, the addiction is a disease, they are saying the tool of that particular kind of threat is absolutely necessary. We cannot lose that threat, otherwise people won't get well. Yes?
You asked for doctors to correct you. I am a doctor.
Yes.
I'm board certified in addiction medicine. And I will say the issue is very complex. Mm-hmm. And I don't personally agree with you.
You're back here.
Okay. I am a doctor. I am board certified.
Where's the mic? Mike.
Okay.
Give her the mic, Mike.
I am a doctor.
Yes.
I am board certified in addiction medicine. And I'm here to say, the reality is the issue is very complex. And I'll simply say, I don't agree with you. I don't agree because, in fact, during Prohibition, the use of alcohol did go way, way, way down, and it never recovered. For every fentanyl death, there's approximately 4 alcohol deaths and maybe 10 tobacco deaths. That the criminal justice system, God knows, is a gigantic problem, and it's got lots and lots of problems. But it's just plain complex, and that's all I have to say, because you've got a presentation to make.
That's fine, and I'm not sure we disagree insofar as what I'm not saying is there'll be no involvement of courts. For example, a misdemeanor carries an enormous burden. It actually has, I actually done the math. There are 573 laws that are triggered if you have a felony drug possession offense. So once you get that felony drug possession, there are 573, most of them are employment, but like I said, myriad things of life are regulated out here. Okay? If it's a misdemeanor drug possession, there are 250. So you cut it more in half, but 250 is nothing to sneeze at. Also, with a misdemeanor, you can go to jail. You can have an ankle monitor. You can be on probation. So there is onerous threats, so to speak, with a misdemeanor that would come. So this Senate Bill 3 doesn't remove all accountability or that form of, scare tactics, I guess, around addiction. I understand that for some people that has been useful. There are people who respond to that. I will also say the flip side is like what's the cost? The cost on the flip side. There is ample research in multiple places in the United States and the UK to show that when you send someone with addiction to jail, their likelihood of dying when they're released is multiplied by 10, between 8 to 10. So what we get are anecdotes, right, of people that made it. And there are plenty, and they're great. They were trotted out by my opponents during issue 1. I got clean because Judge so-and-so cared enough about me to throw me in jail. I get it. And, I believe that story. It's a true story. They're telling their truth. I'm not here to disbelieve them. You're never going to hear the story of the 8 to 10 times people that died.
Exactly.
By default. They're not alive to tell you that story. Right, there's research, and I'm not making this up, this is real research, and it's been repeated multiple places, multiple times. So we need to think hard about what are the consequences of our choices when we're criminalizing the disease of addiction. And so that's why I'm saying, we can talk more about it, and I would love to talk to you more about that offline. So that's drugs. So Senate Bill 3 it's in a fight right now, whether or not it will do this dropping down from felony to misdemeanor. The other big part of issue 3, so reclassifying drug possession and retroactivity is the other key fighting point, if there's a contention point. That is, issue 1 was going to do that, felony misdemeanor, and do it retroactively. So anybody with an offense, 10, 20, 30 years old, right, currently in prison perhaps for one of these low-level drug possession cases, they could get out. Or they could, reclassify their offense and then have those jobs go away. Like I said, the 573 laws get shrunk down to 250 laws, right? The barriers that are upon a person shrink if you can retroactively reclassify their past drug possession offense from felony down to misdemeanor. So that's not in Senate Bill 3 right now, and so we have to fight to get it in. The reclassification part is in, and we have to fight to keep it in. And then retroactivity, we have to fight to get in. And again, many are opposed to that. That's where it stands right now. So to the extent this body engages with your state representatives, our state Senator Cecil Thomas is, of course, a major leader in doing those two things, protecting the reclassification part and fighting to get it retroactive and keeping that in. It's had several hearings in the state Senate. It's Senate Bill 3, so it's been in the state Senate. John Eklund, he's the chairman of the committee and is also the lead Republican sponsor of this bill, so he's really the master of the plan right now, at least so far as it's in his hands in the Senate, and then it goes over to the House. So, you're talking to your House members, you're talking to your Senate members. I think having medical perspectives, to give the nuance and help making informed policy choices about this bill would be really valuable. So I encourage you can talk to me. It sounds like Peter was taking notes, and he has my email address, so we can keep talking. Yeah?
Can I make a comment?
Why don't we let him finish his talk first?
Well, I don't mind questions. I love it. It's much more comfortable for me.
I want to make a comment, but I want to wait until you finish with your talk.
Well, I'm on drug sentencing now, so if it's about drug sentencing, let's do it.
Okay. All right. It is
Please.
about this. And this is anecdotal. I have a granddaughter who at 15 met a guy and was shot up with heroin. This is my granddaughter that I saw being born. Okay? And so, some hard things happened, and she was with a bad guy, and he shot her up, and she got addicted to heroin. Now, this girl is 23 now, and she has had the hardest road, but the only thing that she's had that was stable was her mother, my daughter, and our family. And all the time she was back out there, my daughter kept thinking she was going to get a phone call that she was dead. Okay? She prepared herself emotionally, and she had a child, my great-granddaughter, that I watched every day for 2 years while my granddaughter was in jail. Now, My granddaughter had the support of the baby's father's sister and my daughter while she was in jail. If she didn't have that, God only knows what would happen. So she got out, she lied on a application. She got a job she loved. She loved this job. She told her mom, I wake up every day looking forward to go to work. I love this job. The police report came back, guess what happened? They fired her. Of course, because she lied on the application. And why would she say she was in jail on the application? Why would she do that? Because they wouldn't hire her, and she needed the job. So she went back out one time after that firing. It was so discouraging to her. But what she did was, there were some warrants out. She turned herself in because she knew if she turned herself in, she would have to get clean. She turned herself in, and she came out in November of last year, and I watched the baby until November. Now the baby is going to be 3 in June. And of course she's really smart. Her grandmother and I took care of her. Her mom now gets her on the weekends. My daughter got custody. Her mom is with a really wonderful guy, and they get the baby on weekends. And the baby she's doing really well, and she's in preschool now. And my granddaughter told the truth on an application, but talked her way into getting a job by just saying, by talking and saying, look, you know, I'm clean, please hire me. She told the truth, so she's working now. How many people have that? Not that many. She had the support. We're a middle-class family. We don't have drug addiction, crazy people in jail and stuff in our family. That's not our history. Well, maybe way back. If we checked, I'm sure there were. Well, actually, my grandfather had a problem. But anyway, back in the hills of Kentucky. But I'm just saying, the only reason why this child is good and this girl is alive is because of her mother and me.
Thank you for that. It's a deep, there's so many deep and powerful stories. That was certainly one of the many things I learned through this whole Issue 1 campaign, was just hearing the stories of people that were furious because they thought I was going to allow their daughter to die because of something. Others that were on the other side, they were like, thank you for doing this because you're going to protect my daughter's life. You know, and I understand this is not an easy topic to talk about. And I think an important point also that we learned through Issue 1 was how race factors into this, right? Is that there are people who feel like, well, drug addiction, that's not my family, you know, and that people that are of a paler complexion get to say that, right? And that when people who are of a darker complexion got to experience how America and this state and this city treated crack addiction through the 80s and 90s, it's searingly painful bitterness. And there are many people of color that voted against Issue 1 precisely because of that, because we didn't do good enough a job. And I have to own part of this. Though we thought about it and worked on it, we didn't get it out there in a really powerful way. It was the story of understanding the failures of the crack epidemic, understanding the racism embedded in our crack cocaine policy, and what that meant for why we needed to change. So respecting and honoring the pain and the racism that happened through that era, even as we're talking about shifting in this era. So that's still there. Like, what I want to say is, like, all this stuff bubbled up through the Issue 1 campaign. It's still live. It's still like in the atmosphere. It's in the soil as we're cultivating what's next, and that happens with Senate Bill 3. So if you want to know more about getting active on Senate Bill 3, lending your expertise, lending your opinion, your personal stories to that work on Senate Bill 3, let's talk. So that's drug sentencing. The next big topic I want to talk about is bail. That's, if you've been paying any attention to criminal justice reform, if you listened to the press conference last week from my brilliant colleague Dorian Mason and Councilman P.G. Sittenfeld, there's a movement afoot to end or at least severely reduce the use of money bail. And I'll just be real simple. Money has no place ever in determining whether someone sits in a cage or not. Period. Period. Money is utterly irrelevant to determining public safety, whether someone is rich or poor, okay? So this whole concept of money bail, you know, it's almost shocking that it just, a few years ago, there was a particular litigator out of, a brilliant young litigator that started going around the country and challenging money bail in various places in the South and winning all these cases using the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. And all of a sudden it was like, there were many people grumbling about it, many people in low-income communities, people in cities all around this, in rural areas too, around this country, but it somehow caught fire a few years ago, and everybody sort of woke up and was like, this is nuts! Like, why do we charge people money to get out of jail? How is that in any way relevant? So, there's all kinds of evidence to show us that there are more productive ways to do what bail in theory was trying to do, which is ensure people come back to court and make sure that the community is safe in the intervening time. That's all the bail theoretically was supposed to be about. But it actually does a horrible job of both those things, and there are much better ways. And that's what the Councilman Sitfeld's motion is about, and what there are other things. And the neat thing about bail is, unlike drug sentencing is a state policy, right? Senate Bill 3, we're just talking about state legislators, that's who we're engaging with. Bail reform can happen both locally, city council, there's stuff that needs to happen with judges, whom I believe you probably talked to and recruit and cultivate as candidates. I'm just guessing the people in this room do that kind of thing. So local judges, local politicians are making choices about bail. There is also a state level component to bail reform. So we can talk about kind of, there's lots of opportunity to plug in depending on where your political connections lie. So bail reform is essentially like, what are the processes and steps and new structures we can create that get money out of that system and make smarter decisions. Basically, we want to decide, is somebody at a risk of fleeing? And what I've talked to the Pretrial Justice Institute. They've been around for over 40 years. All they do is bail reform. OJPC, as you just heard from me, is doing all these things. All the criminal justice system, to me, is like an enormous set of issues, not just one issue. But the Pretrial Justice Institute National Group works only on bail. They've done it for 40 years. They've researched almost every jail, literally, in the country. They have stats, and what they say is, you can, if you take the universe of everyone arrested, 100% of the people, 70% of those people you can send home with nothing more than a please come back to court and maybe a text message reminder. And they will come back to court, and 90% of them will not have committed any new offense. Okay? So 70% of people will actually show up to court if you just tell them to and give them, and nowadays we have these great systems for text message reminders. It's proven around the country as being this really low cost, low invasion kind of way of telling people to come back. 70%. 30% of the people need to get a hearing within 24 hours. So they don't need to be languishing in jail. 48 hours in jail, your life starts to fall apart. Okay? You lose your job, you start to lose your housing, you lose your custody of your kids, you're losing all kinds of, so we need to get rapid hearings. But 30% of the people should get hearings within 24 hours, and of that 30%, so like 2/3 of them, 20%, should probably can walk with supportive conditions. Don't go near him or her. Don't go in that neighborhood. You have to wear an ankle monitor. You have to start going to this drug treatment program. There are supportive conditions that don't involve incarceration. They can get out. So there's 20%. All that's left is 10%, okay, that actually probably need to be held, and they need to be held because there's affirmative evidence that they are likely to flee and or commit violence. They're a real risk. And you can determine these things without money anywhere in the system at all. None. And the thing is, right now, we have this horrifically overcrowded jail. Sheriff Neal has got this jail crammed with people, dangerous, and you're nodding there, you know what it's like. I mean, it's horrific in there. Now, Bob Newman, a lawyer in town, sued, and it shrunk it, put a little bit of a cap on it, but people are still sleeping in what they call boats. You know those plastic sleds that kids go on? They're like about this long, and they're like, that's what people are literally sleeping in. They call them boats. This kind of plastic shell on the floor. It's dangerous, it damages people's mental illness, it damages their physical and other kinds of illnesses that they have. It's a horrible condition, and it's not making us safer. It's not needed. It is absolutely unnecessary. But if we did a system that found the processes and procedures to get that 70% of the people never coming into jail, the remaining 30% getting reasonable hearings fast, and 20% of those people getting out too, with supportive guidance conditions, some kind of limitations perhaps, but not in the jail, then we don't have an overcrowded jail. We've got space, we got 70 to 80% of the people in our jail are there pre-trial. 70 to 80% of the people crammed in this jail are not there serving time for a crime they committed, but for a crime they've been accused of. And they don't need to be there. That needs to change. And it absolutely can change. With, I think, P.G. Sittenfeld's thing, a step. What he said, all his motion said was, non-violent misdemeanors will be presumed to be released, with no money bail. That's a great step. There are more steps to be taken. There's a question some people will ask me probably about risk assessments, and there's a, risk assessments might have their place, but it should be limited. Risk assessments are these like structured surveys that some trained staff member at the jail would give a person to decide based on past research whether someone's likely to reoffend. Some of the problems with those risk assessments, I just want to warn people, is that they ask things like number of prior arrests, which if you live in Avondale is a heck of a lot different than if you live in Mason. And that's not because it's more dangerous or you're a worse person, it's because people are more policed in some parts of the city, and a lot of it has to do with race. So those risk assessments can ask neutral sounding questions that end up reinforcing race. So we have to watch out for those, and they have to be done carefully. And they have a limited use in certain contexts, perhaps. But there are other ways. So bail reform, I can't go into all the depth right now. We can certainly have responsive to questions for sure. But my colleague Dorianne Mason, whom some of you maybe saw in that press conference earlier last week, she is our maestro on all things related to bail. So anything you want to know about bail, any activity you want to get engaged with on bail, absolutely talk to Dorianne. I think the plug I want to make is this absolutely, one of the things I think all people of goodwill, and perhaps politically minded folks, want to do is raise the profile of judicial elections. Judges, they get overlooked. They're down at the bottom and back of the ballot. One way that needs to happen is by making bail the issue of judicial elections. And I'm a nonpartisan, so I'm going to be saying the same message to people on all, regardless of the color of their bumper stickers. But I want all judges to be talking about this, and I hope you can help bring that up. It's like this has got to be the topic. This has got to be the topic of every judicial candidate as they're being screened, as they're going through primaries, as they're going to general elections. They bail. That's our local judicial election issue. Yes.
Michael, where's the mic?
No, just wait. Is your presentation completed?
No, but I love talking. I'm much more conversational.
Well, I just want to tell you about this group, because once they start asking questions, they don't stop.
We got through drug sentencing with some really powerful questions. I loved it. Let's talk about bail.
Well, let's hear Are judges allowed to, it's at their own discretion about whether they do bail or not?
Yes. So judges can do it individually, but no judge wants to go out there and have, there are some judges, I don't want to put anybody out there right now, but there are some judges that are better and some that are worse, right? But for all of them, they're politically at risk to the extent they let go of that one bad person who, they decided to take a chance on, and then that person does something bad, and now they're, that's going to be stinging them at the primary or at the general election. The way to solve that is that judges together can change the local rules. So that's why it's an electoral issue. It's not that one judge says, I'm going to be the hero on bail and do things differently than all the other 13 or 14 or whatever. Yeah. It's that together, the collective of the judges are going to rewrite their local court rules. That's what needs to happen. Real specific and real concrete. Local court rules can change within the context even of the Supreme Court's statewide rules and statewide statutes. There is ample space for local courts to change their bail practices in dramatically fairer ways. And that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, I just wondered if it made sense for us to start lobbying the judges we got elected, because a lot of us worked very hard to get Terry Nestor and others.
Yes.
So it's worth lobbying.
It is. It is. And I just want to point out too, all bail is determined interestingly in the first instance by municipal court judges, no matter what the offense. When a case comes into court, it first gets arraigned in what's called Room A, which is in the Justice Center downtown. And it's a cycle of every week for 14 weeks. A new municipal court judge is in charge of Room A. So if it's a felony case, it eventually goes up to the felony judge. The felony judge can reset the bail if if they're asked by the defendant. But all the initial bail determinations at the first jump is set by municipal court judges. So that's our first and foremost conversation target, so to speak, is talking to muni court judges.
I might have missed this, I'm sorry, but I'm wondering, did you address the 3 strikes sentencing rule that Rockefeller instituted?
No, 3 strikes, we're talking about a couple different states right there, California, New York, Rockefeller laws. I didn't, and I'm not going to today. That is related to drug sentencing. We were talking about drug sentencing before, but we don't do 3 strikes like that in Ohio.
Two things. You might want to tell them about how you helped Tyra.
Yes.
As she now works for you.
Yes.
And also, is there any chance we can ever get Ohio to be able to probate family members? That would have solved their problem. In some states they can do. A lot of people know that their grandson is crazy and addicted and they can't get him to treatment. I think we should be able to probate them, force them into a treatment to save their lives, like some states can.
Yeah. There is some civil liberty issues with civil commitment, but and there's racial dynamics there. I think it's a good debate to have. It's certainly better than throwing them in jail and giving them nothing other than detoxing on a concrete floor, which is horrific. I'd be willing to have that debate. Right now, that's not in Senate Bill 3. I know Chief Synan, if anybody knows Chief Synan out in Newtown, he's a big fan of expanding civil commitment, and he's a part of the heroin task force locally. There's been a lot of talk about it. I don't think I've seen it come to fruition yet at the state level. Yeah,
Tyra.
I'm going to get to Tyra. Yes, footnote, Tyra, yes, but not yet. Please.
The USA leads the world in incarceration.
Yes.
We incarcerate more people than China. China is 3 times our population. It's kind of crazy. These are crazy numbers, not just proportion, but actually raw numbers.
Stand up and talk loud.
Actual raw numbers, we lead the world in incarceration. We incarcerate more folks than China. Our prison system is the current evolution of apartheid in America also. Ohio specifically had 8,000 to 9,000 prisoners in 1970. It has like 50,000 now. That's like sextuple. It's not that different from all the other industrial states.
Yep.
Used to be industrial states, excuse me.
Exactly.
Pennsylvania, Illinois, Texas leads us. Florida's worse. New York's worse. California's worse. So it really is a crazy problem. You incarcerate folks. The big money in drugs, those folks never do any time.
Exactly.
Never do time. The big drug companies, create lots of time. Those folks don't do any time.
Right.
The folks behind, let's do Iran-Contra got crack into the black community. Those folks aren't doing any time, and most of them were pardoned by George Bush Sr.
Yes. Bush 1.
So it's really senior, right, senior. Amen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we're out of control with incarceration. We're out of control with how we deal with drug addiction. I urge you to look at Portugal, and I'm curious too, for those that are practicing in addiction medicine, is like what do they think of the Portugal model, where it's all legalized and we're just going to invest in drug treatment and not incarceration at all.
It's not criminalized. I think
Exactly.
Is there a difference between being legalized and not
Decriminalized.
Right. Well, worth very lively debate on all that, and I probably can't go as thoroughly as I could into the whole history of incarceration and the evolution from slavery to Jim Crow to that, it's a deep topic. For what's in front of us right now, we certainly have Senate Bill 3, not the perfect solution by any chance, but it definitely deserves our political attention. Bail reform can happen locally. It's got to be there with the judges. Our office is actually leading a contingent of civically minded people, you can be one of them, who are getting trained to go have these conversations one-to-one-to-one. Because I think the way judges start paying attention to it in their campaigns is that before campaign season rolls around, they've actually met with people, unexpected people, you know, people from different parts of the city, people with different faces, people with different incomes, all showing up together and be like, I'd just like to talk to you about bail. How often has that happened with our local judiciary? Probably never. Okay, so that just them getting a meeting where someone just says, I'd like to talk about bail is a huge deal. And so we're trying to coordinate those kinds of conversations so that every judge gets the message that Cincinnatians are paying attention to bail reform. And we can help train you on that. So if you're excited about that, you can talk to me. That's bail. Last thing is our parole reform and a new project we're going to be launching in a couple weeks. One, so this is a two-part thing. Parole reform. The parole board is straight up corrupt. I'm just going to say it. Like we know it. Our office has done really in-depth litigation with individual clients. We talked to a recently resigned parole board member who resigned under protest because of the horrible things that were going on there. We've seen so much crookedness. And part of it is just the lack of transparency. The laws are terrible. The parole board can basically do anything it wants. No one reviews it. None of their records are public records. No one can find them or know what happened. So it's just it's a badly designed system that then fosters bad government. And you just straight up good government people got to look at a system like that and say that has got to change. And there are great ways to do it. We've got a good package of ideas that we're working on to push through legislation to change how the parole board works, the transparency and the appealability. And I think that would pretty dramatically change the practice, because right now the practice is terrible. People get flopped routinely. Flopped is a legal term. You come up for parole, right? You've heard people get these ranges of sentences, 10 to 20, 13 to 17 years, or whatever. What that means is that you're 13, you come before the parole board, and then you get if they reject you, which they always do, no one gets it on the first time, which that's part of our litigation, saying that's just a ridiculous policy. How can no one ever be rehabilitated enough at their first hearing? How is that possible? But they always flop everybody, and then they give them long flops, which is you can't come back until, and it's not just 1 year, you use 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. They give these long flops. And they don't tell you what's wrong or what you can do to change. Because the reason you get flopped is the seriousness of the offense. So you committed a serious offense, granted, it was violence, or you stole a lot of money, you did a lot of damage. Okay, we get it. That's the judge's job. That's what the judge decided when you were in court. That's why they gave you that range of sentence. That's what the legislature decided too, when the legislature set the sentencing range with the penalty. All that's been decided. It's not the parole board's business, frankly, to then decide, well, it was a serious offense, so we can't let you out at the minimum sentence because it was serious. That's already been determined. What the seriousness of the offense was is how one got that sentence. So that we're trying to kind of crack through the madness there and say that the focal point of the parole board should be, what have you done since you've been inside? Are you ready for release? Are you somebody that did nothing but get in fights while you've been in here? Or, like Tyra Patterson, who I'll get to in a minute, are you the most exemplary human being that has ever set foot in an Ohio prison? That might be a little hyperbole, but Tyra is quite an incredible human being. And now she's my colleague. And I'll get to her in a second, but parole board reform would change these rules. How what's the decision principles by which the parole board operates, how we make these things transparent. Yes?
I mean, I don't read every single thing, but I'm wondering, is there publicity?
Wait.
I'll repeat her question back. How about that? I can hear you, Randall.
Here's the microphone.
The mic's here.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering.
Hold it up. Right up to it. Yeah, up to your mouth.
I'm just wondering, has there been, is there coverage in the papers about this, about the crookedness of the parole board?
A little bit. If you look, Shirley Smith.
It seems like this should be everywhere.
It should be, and it will be. We're working on that. We have litigation going on, so some of the stuff has to be quiet because it's going through the court system. But if you look closely, I encourage you to Google Shirley Smith. She was a former state senator. She then got on the Ohio Parole Board, stayed there for a few years, and then resigned and said, this place is horrible, the level of crookedness. So she resigned loudly and got some stuff in the paper. She's going to be doing some more activity around the state to try to pump this up. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just wrap up with what we're going to next and how this ties into Tyra. So first of all, Tyra spent 23 years in prison for a crime she did not commit. We've got a great website just about Tyra. She speaks everywhere. I mean, I think some people here have probably heard her speak. She's all around town. But if you haven't, to make time to hear Tyra speak, if you get a chance. She tells a really compelling story of being, a young woman who dropped out of school in, I believe, 6th grade, and she tells her own story, but then she got caught up in the wrong people, wrong time, got accused of a crime that she did not commit and spent 23 years in prison. Now, instead of being steeped in bitterness, which is honestly probably how I and many people here would be, she turned that into gold, really. She has such a shining spirit, and she is reaching young people, telling her story and saying, giving them hope, giving them real vision for what they can do. Also calling the system to accountability, saying this didn't need to happen to me. There are other things that could have happened that would have protected me and not thrown my life away in the way that it was in prison. So that's, I'll say that it's always tricky for me because I don't want to speak for Tyra. She's so well-spoken herself. She's just not here. So please, if anyone wants to get an opportunity, or maybe you have a venue where you'd like to hear Tyra speak, we could probably set that up. But then you can really, truly hear her true story in her own true voice. But what Tyra's story is partly about is the difference between OJPC and the Innocence Project. People know UC's Innocence Project, a wonderful program. Probably I think it's one of the most successful innocence projects in the country. Honestly, gotten the most people released. We're the Guilty Project. OJPC represents people that have done things, except for Tyra. Tyra is our unique kind of hybrid case where she was actually innocent and we got her out. Not our normal kind of case. What we're often doing is protecting people who admit that they did something wrong. The question is, what do we do now? Do we throw them away? Does the prison time do anything to actually benefit the victim? Is the victim benefited by this continual decades upon decades of years? And what about the difference, like I'm saying with parole, of people that are in prison for doing something really harsh and have changed versus those that haven't? Do we have any system or way of recognizing them? So OJPC is about to launch something. We're toying with a name, probably something like Beyond Guilty. You're going to hear about it a lot from David Singleton soon. But the point is that OJPC, with pride, stands up for those that actually have committed an offense and need a different response, even now, years later. I'm working on a case that I can't wait to get out. I can't talk about it too much because it's not sealed yet, but it has to do with someone who committed a violent offense and I've been able to connect with the victims. And that's actually how Tyra got free as well. The victim spoke up and said, Tyra didn't do it, and I want Tyra free. I'm working with a victim who said, that man did do it, and I want him free. And so I'm really excited about that story, and we're going to have more. You're going to see more of those kinds of stories coming out of OJPC, where we're calling forth, calling out the system and saying, one way I like to say it is, when people go to prison, we use this phrase. They're paying their debt to society. And I would challenge all of you, never say that phrase again. Exactly. No debt is paid by anyone sitting in a cage for any period of time. Prison is not really accountability. Probably the best thing you could read if I gave anybody an assignment out of today's talk, there's a book called Until We Reckon. Until We Reckon. And it's by a woman named Danielle Sered, S-E-R-E-D. She leads one of the best restorative justice programs in the country. It's in New York City, and it's very much steeped in racial equity. And what she's saying is, if we're going to tackle mass incarceration, and I'm guilty of this as anybody, we can't just talk about nonviolent, low-level possession drug offenders. That is a driver, right? Drug possession, failed war on drugs is a driver of mass incarceration. But we actually have to talk about violence if we're going to talk about our bloated prison system. And what we need to say is that accountability looks like someone answering for their crime, looking into their own self, figuring out why they did that, maybe even taking steps to make it as right as they can and do things that repair. Sitting in a prison cell for 10 years versus 20 years versus 30 years actually doesn't do any of those things. And so what are the ways we can fundamentally change our whole approach to violence and crime? That's some deep stuff, but that's where the Beyond Guilty project, OJPC's new project that's going to launch soon, is going. And if that excites you, even though it's kind of nebulous right now, if that's something you kind of want to really sink your teeth into or find out more about, please also talk to me and I'll connect you to David Singleton, our fearless executive director. 1 o'clock, so I think we're done.
Wait. So if you have a question, speaker will be willing to speak to you after this meeting. Come up and ask him. He's here for questions, and we have his boss. So David's the boss. David's the boss. The boss is the boss. She's the boss. That's the boss. Thank you so much for coming. We have a wonderful week coming up next week with Bill Phyllis coming for the Ohio Coalition for Equity and Adequacy in School Funding. It should get here early because it's going to be very crowded because there's a whole bunch of people who are interested in coming to that meeting. Yes?
Can I say one thing?
Yes, of course you can. Here's the boss of the boss.
Actually, what Stephen didn't end up telling you is that he's leaving OJPC and he's moving on to Transformation Fund.
Yeah, the Ohio Transformation Fund.
Ohio Transformation Fund. So he has done such wonderful work here. So now we're going to have him statewide. So it's not a loss, it's an addition. But I just wanted you all please to give him a hand because he's done such
Okay. If they're not smart enough to escape, these our people are here. Have a good day and enjoy the better weather that we're supposed to have.
Can I make an announcement? I wasn't here for announcements. Okay. I just want to, all of you all that signed the Orsenko petition, all of the petitions got delivered yesterday to Orsenko with your comments about protecting our water. I just wanted to let you know that they got hand-delivered. So everybody that made comments and signed to not change the water laws, they were taken to Orsenko yesterday. I helped them. Yes.
Well, we got here late, but did anybody make a plug for the movie The Public?
Great.
Yeah, great. It was filmed in Cincinnati Public Library downtown.
Get safe.
And Amelia Estevez wrote, directed, and starred in it. And there's quite a thread of the criminalization of the homeless, among other threads that run through it. You've got to see it. It's very powerful in a quiet way.
What's the name? Where?
Esquire.
What's the name of it?
The Public, as in the public library and all the homeless people that spend so much time there. So it really is a good look at the complexity of homelessness, the politicizing, the criminalization, the abuse. It's really powerful. Thank you.
Have a nice day.